Regular meeting, and I will call the meeting to order. First on our agenda, we've got a really neat proclamation from Weld County. John is going to kind of present it. We've got a bunch of people from Road and Bridge here. Really relates to the work that we had assisted them in with the flooding that happened over there in 2013, and something that the county, I think I can speak for the entire Board of County Commissioners, we're very proud in our ability to lend a hand to our neighboring, to our fellow counties in Colorado. So,
excellent. Well, thank you, Rob. And what I'd like to do is I will go ahead and read this proclamation that's been presented to Pickens County from Weld County, and then I'd like to invite Mike McAndrews and Road and Bridge employees who actually went over to Weld County, and we've got a number of representatives from Road and Bridge here today. We'll do some introductions. This is a group that really pulled it together to either directly go over there or cover the work that was left here at home, so that we could provide assistance to Weld County. But first, let me go ahead and read this proclamation from the Weld County Commissioners that has been presented to Pickens County. Whereas Section 3011-107-1cc Colorado Revised Statutes authorizes the Board of County Commissioners by resolution, memorial, plaque, or limited gift to honor, commemorate, memorialize, or acknowledge outstanding service or other events or actions, accomplishments, or achievements deserving of recognition. And whereas the Board of Weld County Commissioners wishes to proclaim its sincere gratitude to Pickens County for their assistance in recovering from the 2013 flood Operation Noah's Ark. And whereas on September 10th, 2013 through September 16th, 2013, several areas throughout Weld County experienced twice the annual rainfall. And whereas flooding in the high mountains of the counties to the west caused raging rivers and rushing waters throughout Weld County, rivers such as the St. Vrain, Boulder Creek, Big Thompson, Little Thompson, South Platte, and Coshla swelled and jumped their banks, carving new courses through farmland and neighborhoods that will be forever changed and inflicting unthinkable physical, human, and emotional toll on our community. And whereas there were more than 654 lane miles of roads, 122 bridge structures, and over 80 irrigation structures impacted by the flooding, causing impassable closed roadways, long detours, and eliminating access to several communities and severely hampering farmers attempting to harvest their crops. Now therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Weld County does hereby honor and recognize Pickens County Commissioners and several of their employees who gave selflessly of their time to lend a hand and restore areas devastated most hard hit by the flooding. The assistance brought a ray of sunshine and strengthened our resolve to our citizens in a time of need. Signed, Weld County Board of County Commissioners. And they went ahead and framed this with some pictures of the damage. Mike, do you want to come up here with you guys here and do some introductions? I think we're going to... There you go. You got to use that.
I'm Mike McAndrews, Road and Bridge Superintendent. This is Manuel Eduardo and Ignacio Gonzalez. They worked 12 hours a day for a week straight, assisting in hauling gravel to build infrastructures for helping Weld County. So thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Nacho. I'd also like to introduce the rest of the team. Scott Matthijs, our crew foreman, John Cerise, Matthew Ridgway, Stuart Prideaux, DJ Hughes, and Armando is on vacation, Armando Medina. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
We'll make sure this gets hung in a highly visible place for us. Guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Rachel?
I'd like to add just a a couple of words briefly. This was presented to Steve Child and myself at the CCI summer conference in front of all the other counties and county commissioners. There were 4 other counties that they acknowledged for their extra work. They said a lot of counties helped out, but they wanted to acknowledge these 5 above all else. And while they're in absence here and not been mentioned directly, there was great thanks to Nan Sundin and Mitzi from Health and Human Services, who went down to help them with enrolling all the new people who needed assistance, who had lost jobs, who had lost child care, who had lost all their activities. And the gratitude was really sincere. And I'd like to mention as well, as John helped coordinate all this, and Valerie McDonald as our emergency services manager, that it wasn't just Weld County. We assisted in some of the other communities as well. And it really is a great way to build relationships across this state. Sometimes people look at Pickens County as being a Boulder's second cousin and a little far to this side or another, but it really went a long way towards people realizing we're all in this game together, we're all neighbors, and we're all Coloradans.
Thank you, Rachel.
So thank you again.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything that defines our community better than helping a hand when people need a hand helped by them, you know, and it's just great that the people within Pickens County's departments have relocated for a period of time, affects their family life, affects so much, and we really appreciate you guys being stellar examples of our community and of our organization. So thank you. Next on our agenda is, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We will have one change to the agenda. Item number 5, consent public hearing, new retail marijuana application. This will need to be continued to July 9th. There's some information that is still forthcoming that we need, that we thought we'd have in hand to complete the application at this point. The applicant has been notified and understands that, and so we will be asking to continue that to July 9th. Otherwise, there are no other changes to the agenda.
Okay. John, in regard to that one application, I don't know if there's some way that we can get the applicant aware of the fact that there is a Crystal River caucus meeting on the 10th, and this is one of the issues that they do desire to talk about at that Crystal River caucus meeting. So it might be beneficial to continue it to a week after our next regular meeting, because there might be discussion change to the recommendations of the caucus meeting at that time period. So I would just make the applicant aware of that if at all possible. And it's the applicant's choice, really, whether or not they want to come and present before that caucus meeting or after that caucus meeting. But I think that's crucial. Rachel?
It should also be mentioned that the Gardner takings determination that's under our land use action has been requested to be moved to July 9th as well. So that won't be heard today.
Thank you. At this point, I will open the public comment part of our section. Anybody wishing to speak on items not in public hearings of our agenda today may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public comment portion of our agenda and move to commissioner comments. Any commissioners wish to talk on items? Steve.
Well, since Seth didn't want to get up and talk about it, then I'll bring it up just to make you all aware that this past Saturday night there was a fireworks display at a party on Snowmass Creek, and it was apparently a lot louder and later at night than anybody had anticipated. And Seth lives very near to where the fireworks display was, and his dog jumped over a 6-foot high fence, or one of his dogs, I don't know. You have a lot of dogs, I know, Seth, but the one dog jumped over a 6-foot high fence and disappeared for a better part of a day, and fortunately, Fortunately, the dog eventually came back, but just wanted the other commissioners to be aware of, there are citizens upset about the noise that was created by this fireworks display, and we might be having discussions about that in the near future.
Yeah, my thought when hearing that was, you know, we have had some discussions and some work sessions on the fireworks and, you know, what's the best environmental thing to do with fireworks, what's the best for sound. It is an administrative approval that gets approved through the county manager and the sheriff's office, or just the sheriff's office.
Just for clarification, Picking County does not issue fireworks permits. They are issued through the fire district. There is a signature line for both the sheriff and county manager. The sheriff's signature is there to ensure that there isn't a fire ban in place that would otherwise preclude the fireworks display from happening. Mine is more just to make sure that we've been informed that it's happening, and are there any other special event requirements. In this case, this was a private party that fell outside of our special events permitting process. So we do not issue a fireworks permit as a county.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. You know, perhaps we could ask the fire marshal in for a work session discussion about the topic going forward. I would like to know, did he issue any time constraints on the display? And you know, I think that the city of Aspen had kind of similar issues many years ago, and I'm not sure how well they're following through on it, but there became a real notification of the neighbors type of requirement before a permit issued. So I think we should consider having a work session with the fire marshal who can issue these permits and have a discussion about how to appropriately address neighborhood impacts.
Well, Michael?
So, John, was a permit issued for this?
Yes, a fireworks permit was issued through the Basalt Fire Protection.
By the Basalt Fire District.
Yeah.
George?
Weddings seem to be taking a whole new level here in Pickens County. But as we're talking about new land use codes for rural remote and tents and things like that, is fireworks, would that be something that could be part of that discussion?
Well, it's at the board's discretion. In 2007, counties were granted the ability to regulate fireworks displays. Prior to that, the counties were not given the authority to provide permits or prohibit displays outside of evidence of fire danger. And so that we do have the ability to regulate on that particular issue, so that could be a discussion. This was not in the rural and remote area, but it certainly was an impact. We do know that it was supposed to happen at 9:30. We have that in the documents. It definitely came later. I could also hear them at my home. And I sympathize with Seth. My dogs were upset also, and we were pretty far away from it. And this, when I looked at the clock, I was surprised because I think this was happening closer to around 10:30. So we're looking into, you know, what does that mean? But to answer your question, George, yes, we do have the ability now to do that. I believe our regulations or our process that's in place was developed prior to that authority being given, and so that's certainly something we can look at.
Yeah, so I'd like to have perhaps ComDev to think about that when they come back to us, and perhaps throw that in as part of the presentation and discussion.
Yeah. Well, similar to George, but with the caucus master plans being updated, it's really a question that the caucuses could discuss about the process in their neighborhood. And I think that would inform ComDev.
And one of my thoughts with this when I heard about it was, I think part of our work going forward with the special event permits and tenting in rural and remote is somewhat redefining what triggers a special event permit, and maybe something like a fireworks display over a certain magnitude would trigger a special, could be worked in to trigger a special event permit. Therefore, we'd have a little bit more of control to things like notice and safety and those sorts of things. So I think just as a reminder, when we do have the work sessions regarding special event permits, tenting, and those sorts of things, maybe a reminder about firework activity be added to that. Yeah, Seth, if you, just real quick, go
I
ahead.
wasn't going to say anything. Thank you.
You need a microphone.
Here, yeah.
Seth.
Thanks. Can you guys, is the microphone on?
Yes.
It just
It's for
worked-
the
it's
soundtrack.
for
Yeah, I
the-
can't hear.
the TV.
I just wanted, Steve spoke for me, thank you, because I wouldn't have said anything, but in the 36 hours my dog was missing, I was definitely upset and didn't sleep and jogged 20 miles and rode my horse all over Windstar, so I wrote a letter, and as my mom always told me, don't send the letter until you let it sit for 24 hours and think about it, but I wrote a letter and copied Steve and to our caucus, and I was upset just because I've always thought fireworks are obnoxious, and I do think it goes against everything that we stand for in Old Snowmass, the integrity of nature and protecting the livestock and the wildlife. But I just want to go on record. The reason I wasn't going to say anything is I like my neighbors who had the party, and he actually purchased Windstar, and he's made it a nicer place to ride our horses and filled in all the ground squirrel holes and stuff like that. So I'm not on any sort of witch hunt out to get my neighbor because he followed all the rules and he was permitted. I just sort of made a statement that, hey, this took us by surprise, and it was a little terrifying for the animals and annoying for the people, and my neighbor's horses were stampeding back and forth, and we were worried they were going to break through the fence line. And it's just, I don't like the fireworks, but I like my neighbor. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments at this point? Rachel?
Yeah, I participated in the Club 20 board retreat last week, Thursday and Friday in Cedar Edge. I am now the secretary of the executive board of that organization, and I just wanted to make the board and the public aware that one of the topics that came up, they're going to now take it to their broader board to be a priority for the coming year, is to find a way to start to vet this idea that's been growing across parts of the West to petition and force the federal government to return all the public lands to the states to manage, lease, sell, do whatever they'd like. This would be exclusive of wilderness areas and national parks, but it is certainly not a proposal I'm in favor of. I've heard about it before and brought it to the board's attention before. It just seems to be something that's taking on a life of its own in Arizona, in Utah, in Alaska, and Idaho. There's some legal arguments to be made that the western states are not being treated the same way the states who had public lands north of the Mississippi were treated. People are looking at the revenues that North Dakota gets from what used to be its public lands, but now all the oil and gas drilling is on state land. And they're going to be trying to really vet what are the pros and cons. And that's the one thing I've asked. The group already has it on their books that they support such a transfer, but they really can't say what the financial implications would be one way or for the other for Coloradans or for our country. But it's just no longer a little whisper campaign and a few nonprofits funded by who knows who. It's becoming something that's really being seriously taken up in our state. And so for those of us who love our public lands and don't believe the Forest Service should be starved to the point where they can't take care of their own lands, this is a kind of a troubling development, and I think that our board and others in the community really need to stay on top of it.
Thank you. Additional commissioner comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to our consent action items. First, we have the approval of minutes for work session May 13th, special meeting of May 20th and 27th, and regular meetings of May 28th and June 11th.
Move to approve.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
Although I wasn't here on the 13th, I read the minutes. So I'll vote on it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners, Pickens County, Colorado, adopting independent.
Appointing.
What's that?
Appointing, not adopting.
Oh, appointing. Independent hearing officers to hear taxpayers' appeals of the Pickens County Assessor valuation. And Jeanette Jones is put on this to present this item.
Okay, every year, beginning May 1st.
John, move your microphone over.
Oh, okay, thank you. The county assessor starts hearing appeals from taxpayers that wish to appeal their valuation. Excuse me, that is June 1st. By the 30th of June, they do have to notify those taxpayers of changes or no changes to their assessment. If a taxpayer is not satisfied with that notice or what the assessor has determined, they have an opportunity to come to the Board of Equalization, which is the Board of County Commissioners. And this year, as in past years, myself was directed to retain hearing officers, this year one officer, to hear those appeals on your behalf. And this year, because we will probably only have a handful of appeals, the assessor had 83 appeals total, and historically we received 10 to 15% to the Board of Equalization. One hearing officer chose not to do it this year. He just likes to hear appeals or to serve on your behalf on the reevaluation years. And then the other two officers are down valley, and I spoke to them, and it's a long commute for them if they come up here and there's a settlement reached and all. And so it was determined that we would, and Mick is here, to retain Mick Ireland this year to hear the appeals on your behalf. He's close, and if something's settled the minute before, we can let him know, and it just seemed like it was a more workable solution this year to have one hearing officer serve. And then next year, we'll be in a reevaluation year again, so it'll be totally different.
Questions? Rachel?
Michael, go first.
Oh, Michael,
You're just
I'm
always-
sorry.
Did you mention arbiters?
Arbitrators?
You did?
Yeah, there's just a list of arbitrators. You don't retain arbitrators, you just approve a list of arbitrators.
Okay.
And that's before you also. Thank you, Michael.
And we've budgeted $17,000 for this, and
Correct.
that seems adequate. Rachel?
And Jeanette, does Mick Ireland have previous experience in this role for the county?
Yes, he does. And he actually served last year. He served many years. He served when he was a commissioner, and he's also served several years in the past. And Mick is here if you would like to.
No, I just
ask him
wanted
any
your
questions.
referral. Thank
Okay.
I will accept the motion, if there's one out there.
I would move to approve a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, appointing independent referees, parens, hearing officers, to hear taxpayer appeals of the Pickens County Assessor's valuation and developing a list of persons qualified to act as arbiters of property value disputes.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mick. Next is a special event liquor license application, Friends of the Aspen Animal Shelter, and Jeanette is also presenting that, and Seth, if we have any questions for you.
You want me to stand?
Yeah. I think there's,
I want to add fireworks onto our party.
do we have a microphone there, or?
The ones without percussion.
The
Oh, there is-
little
okay.
one is there.
Just hold this up.
Or just put it in front of you. Picks up the area. So this is an event that's happened very similar over the last 3 years, I believe. I think
Yeah, last
3 years
several
ago they
years.
moved it to your property versus at the animal shelter.
We had
centers.
done it previously, a lot of years at the Wiley's Ranch in Woody Creek, and 1 year at Chaparral, and then we mixed it up, did some district theater stuff, and this year we're gonna do it for this will be the 3rd year at my house.
And I guess my first question for you, Seth, is, are there any major changes from years previous?
Nothing's changing. I can't even. It's all the same and basically the same people.
And were there any challenges or complaints in the previous years?
No complaints that I'm aware of, and I alert all my neighbors and invite them, and my immediate neighbors I actually even comp their tickets just to make sure they're pleased with the noise that we're making with the band. But I've never heard a complaint.
Any other questions or thoughts? Steve?
I just wanted to note that the day after the animal shelter benefit, the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus uses the tent facility while it's set up on Seth's property, and we just have a annual community picnic there, which doesn't have any. It's not a liquor sales thing that I think some people bring.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought it up because it's fun and everyone's invited, and it's my nonprofit is kind enough to let us use everything the day after, and Dan Sheridan plays music, and we have pony rides for the kids and a petting zoo, and it's just a nice community get together.
Rachel?
Yeah, Seth, I'll be out of towns in New Orleans with the National Association of Counties, so I can't attend, but certainly appreciate all the people who worked so hard to put this together. And just wanted to give you the opportunity to tell the public on TV how to get tickets and what is the date and time.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. So the date is coming up. It's Saturday, July 12th. And for tickets, you can call our nonprofit line, 970-927-1771. And you can also, anyone can call my cell, 970-274-3043. We have Kenichi is catering it for the 2nd year in a row. And we have the disco band that we've used since before the animal shelter was built, and no one thought it was going to happen, and we had to raise money from ground zero. We have Boogie Machine, the disco band that just seems to get everyone on the dance floor, and everybody has a blast. So it's and then we have a live auction, a silent auction. With the live auction, Robert Wagner's on our board, and I auction him off. And he was purchased a number of times last year to play golf with him and go to lunch. And we have other fun stuff like homeless puppies, and I even auction myself off with a whole package.
There you go.
Well, I make myself appealing by 100 days of boarding and 12 groomings and a bag of
Things
dog
like that.
food every month,
Yeah,
stuff like that.
very nice.
So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll accept the motion.
I'll move to approve the special event liquor license application for the Friends of the Aspen Animal Shelter.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
Seth.
it. Thanks.
Next is a emergency ordinance authorizing a third amendment to the communications use lease for Elephant Mountain and the execution of a plan of operations for modification of to the site and rebuilding of the power line. And Jody's not here, but Phyllis is.
I am. This is a project that's been in the queue for quite a long time. The original power line, I think, is around 1964 when the TV service in the county was in its infancy. That power line is being happily serving as a snack for some critters. Because it's rubber coated, it needs to be replaced. We did some analysis on it. We've been working with the Forest Service for a permit. Because our lease didn't include the power line, that's why you have an emergency ordinance in front of you. The original lease did, but in 2004, when we renewed it, it was missed. as well as we're adding a helicopter landing site that was not identified for that site. That's the only way to access the Elephant Mountain communication site. So that's what you have in your packet is the amendments to the lease for that work to be done. We are slated early July. We have a lot of contractors lined up as well as helicopter service that can haul up a new power line. It goes to the top and then it comes down. It's going to be still on the ground. It's going to be a shielded power line, so it won't be a snack anymore. It'll be protected. So it's a really important piece. It's great that that mountaintop site is served by power. Some of our sites are solar. They present some difficulties in this environment. So replacing this line is really important. And we appreciate all the work done by the Forest Service. We're creating some new maps. The map that was in your packet is a little minimalistic. So the Forest Service has asked for us for some other ones. So we're giving them some detailed information on what the site will look like and what is being amended to, exactly where the helicopter site is, exactly where the line's coming up.
I didn't see a map in our packet. I don't know if I missed something.
I can't find a map.
That was maybe it was in the attachment that were not included in your packet because it was part of the lease agreement for the Forest Service, which their lease amendments are quite extensive.
Steve?
Well, Phyllis, there's a question about how many square feet the equipment building will have to be increased by. I think it's probably 35 square feet, but on page 1 of our thing it says 57 square feet, and then in the actual ordinance it says 35, and I just wanted to clarify if it is 35 or 57 square feet.
It may be going from 35, 57, but I'm not sure. I'm going to have to follow up on exactly what that is.
Also, just out of curiosity, in about 1964, I was up on Williams Hill with then County Commissioner Oris Gervas, and we were burying the power line to the TV translators up on Williams Hill. And they probably were the same kind that the rodents might eat the rubber off of. But is the power to Williams Hill still working okay?
I haven't heard of any issues there. It could be, this was not buried at all.
It was just laid on top?
It was just laid on top of the ground, mostly because of the rocky terrain. There's really no way. So the Forest Service getting a permit to actually lay the line on the ground again was a huge undertaking, and it's really the only solution in that terrain. They would prefer them to be buried when they can be buried.
Additional questions? Motion?
I make a motion to approve the emergency ordinance authorizing the third amendment to the communication use lease for Elephant Mountain and the execution of a plan of operations for modifications to the site and rebuilding of the power line.
Second?
First and a second, any discussion?
And so, Phyllis, let me clarify, a map will be attached to this ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll include a map for your confirmatory reading, just so you have an idea of what the site looks like.
Thank you. Additional, this is not a public hearing. Next one's a public hearing. We will have a public hearing at the confirmatory reading, which is set for
July 9th.
July 9th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Phyllis. Next, we have an item that needs to be officially continued. It is a consent public hearing. It's a new retail marijuana application submitted by Cooper Mason 2 LLC, DBA Silver Peak Apothecary. And I will I will first open the public hearing. If there's anybody here wishing to speak on this, they may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this. We will reopen it at its continued date as well.
I would make a motion to continue this item till July 9th.
I'll second that.
First and second, any discuss? Yep.
Didn't we have a request to change from July 9th to a later date?
If the applicant wants to, so it would be continued again, if they want to continue it. That really has to come, I think, at the request of the applicant, whether or not they want to wait for an outcome from the Crystal River Caucus before submitting an application. So I would say continue it to July 9th, and if we want, and if they so requested an additional continuance, we would continue it again. But since it's already been public noticed for today, those notices stay in effect through the continuing period.
I think you could continue it to either the 9th or the 16th at the board's discretion at this point. I think the applicant's expectation, because we hadn't had the discussion about the caucus meeting, was that it would be continued to the 9th, and so it, you know, it may work better to continue it to the 9th, and then if there's anything that happens at that caucus meeting, they could always request another continuance based on that. It would be not the 16th, the 23rd, I apologize. It'd either be the 9th or the 23rd.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to continue it without the approval of the applicant to a different date than they're already aware of. We can always continue it again.
Okay. Yeah, it is awkward because I would hate to take action the day before the caucus meets. And the 9th is the day before the caucus meets. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, the 10th is the day the caucus meets.
Yeah, and the 9th, when we
the
meet
hearing.
is the day before. And
Correct.
so it just seems awkward that we would be making a decision before they feed in their input, even though it would only be for 1 year.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that continuing to the 23rd now is not more appropriate, and thank Michael for pointing that out.
Again, I feel we have the opportunity to continue it till then if the applicant wants to. I mean, the issue is that the caucus has weighed in a moratorium against these types of applications.
Yeah.
And if they want to make an exception, they have to have a formal meeting of the caucus.
I
and
understand
say,
the issue, but that's what I'm saying. We would be deciding it literally 24 hours before they would give us their opinion if we leave it on the 9th.
And so to maintain the integrity of that process, it may make more sense to go to the 23rd.
I would withdraw my motion for the hearing on July 9th.
Okay, if someone wants to make a motion for continuing to the 23rd.
I'll make a motion to continue to July 23rd.
I'll second that.
We have a first and second. Any discussion?
You know, the problem for me is that the caucus didn't request this continuance to a later date. So this is really our own action, and I don't think that this licensing is something the caucus is aware of, because we made an exception to the Crystal River Caucus for licensing, for changing of licenses. So I think we're overreacting, quite frankly, to this, and I think the July 9th date is fine, and that's what they've been told it's going to be continued to. Neither the Crystal River Caucus nor the applicant is here making a request. So I think we're overreacting to it. So, and they have no way of giving input at this point. So a normal continuation would be on July 9th. That's what I think we should leave it at.
I'm in the same agreement that it should be on July 9th, and if the applicant wishes to further continue the application with knowledge that the Crystal River Caucus is going to potentially have some discussion regarding this, that would be the applicant's decision, not the board's. Jeanette, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I was just going to comment that I did send a referral comment to the Crystal River Caucus. That is, and it's my understanding we may have that by the 8th. So it would be my suggestion to, if we do have that comment and it's for your review on the 9th, might make more sense to go ahead and continue it to the 9th. And then if that doesn't happen, or if it's something that you want to talk about more at a future forum, then we could continue that meeting to the 23rd. But it could be we might have that referral comment back in a positive nature and fairness to the applicant.
Yeah.
That's my thought on it.
I will withdraw my motion, and I'll make a comment. The caucus, each caucus operates a little bit differently, and land use applications come in not in accordance when caucuses meet. They come in accordance as they go through the pipeline through our ComDev. Some caucuses can react quickly in terms of the way they're set up. Others have to wait till they have the next meeting. So it may be that at certain times caucuses will not be able to respond to a certain application just because of the way they operate. The crystal is one example. The frying pan is actually a more clear example where they only meet 3 months of the year. And so if applications come in the wintertime, they don't really have a structure to comment. So that's just for an FYI.
I will make a motion to continue the new retail marijuana application submitted by Cooper Mason 2 LLC, doing business as Silver Peak Apocryphy, until July 9th.
I will second that.
I find myself convinced by Michael's argument that it is a public hearing, that should proponents or opponents care to speak at that time, or if comments come in through Jeanette, we will have access to those.
Yeah, and this happens frequently with referrals, that the actions happen before or just after a caucus meeting. It's hard for the caucus to sync up, but in this case, the caucus can come to the hearing and request a continuance or whatever. And I think that's the better way to go, to put the caucus or the applicant in the position of comfort rather than us deciding what's best for the caucus or what's best for the applicant. It's just a procedural thing.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have our consent action first reading for public hearing set on July 9th. The first is a purchase of open space, and Matt is here to present. I'd like him to set up a map and stuff like this, and I'd also like to take a quick restroom break. So can we take 5 minutes while he sets up?
Great.
Thank you.
And Rob, you know I'm going to have to recuse myself on both Hunter
This is the Board of County Commissioners, Pickett County, Colorado, regular meeting, June 25th, 2014. We are in our consent actions first reading set for public hearing on July 9th, and the first item is the Wheatley open space acquisition, and Matt is here to present that. Matt?
Good afternoon. Matt Adeletti, Acquisition Manager for Pickett County Open Space and Trails. I first would like to thank the Dart family who own the property for working with the Open Space and Trails Department to preserve this historic ranch land. I have a vicinity map up right now that shows the property bounded in red. This is right by Old Snowmass. The property was homesteaded by the Wheatley family, and their namesake Wheatley Gulch, Wheatley Ditch, and Wheatley Cemetery are located on Tract 1, which you can see on the map. There is an area located along Lower River Road in the southwest corner of Tract 1 that is well known to some locals and has intermittently been used to access the Roaring Fork River at the bottom of the Toothache Rapid. In approximately 2008, the Darts, who own the property, fenced that area. And I don't have a little laser pointer, but I can bring up another map that shows a zoomed in area. This is I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but this is the area which is the fishing access area, right about here, that was fenced off. And then I've noted the schoolhouse right here on Tract 1 as well. And the other development on the property is on Tract 2, which is right in this area.
So, Matt, the schoolhouse is included in this purchase?
It is not.
But so we have a different lot.
Yes, and I'll bring up that map as well. The property totals, both tracts total about 290 acres, has 2 existing improved building sites. The 2 sites are the schoolhouse and the ranch house with some of the outbuildings, which are down in Tract 2. The property is also habitat for an elk herd that comes down from Wheatley Gulch, and Wheatley Gulch is right over here in Tract 1, which comes down, and the elk come down and cross over and use the river and also graze out in the agricultural fields. The Darts have also seen black bear, mountain lions, and other large wildlife common in the area. In 1997, the county purchased a conservation easement over the entire property, both tracts, for $1.4 million, which Aspen Valley Land Trust was also a party to. The Tract 1 is approximately 137 acres. Tract 2 is approximately 140 acres. Tract 1 has a 6-acre building envelope, which contains the square 100-foot historic schoolhouse. And it's, just like I mentioned, the schoolhouse, it's not really, I can't zoom in too much further, but it's right about there. The conservation easement allows for 1 additional residence to be built within Tract 1. And I'm going to pull up another map that shows those building envelopes. Building envelope 1 within Tract 1 is right here, and building envelope 2 is right here, which is in Tract 2. Both of those are currently undeveloped and vacant land. Both building envelopes allow for a 5,750 square foot residence to be built on it, and each also allow for a TDR to be purchased to expand that square footage to 8,250 square feet. Pickett County, and here I'll bring up another map. So this is the current boundaries as shown by the assessor's maps. I'm going to bring up another map here. The black line you see there is the current boundary alignment. Pickett County staff proposes to purchase approximately 105 acres of the Wheatley Tract 1, which is shown in the yellow, which the boundary, which is currently in the black, would be moved over to the yellow. And the schoolhouse would then be associated with Tract 2. And Tract 1, which is 105 acres, it would be vacant land with no building right. This building envelope that currently exists would be extinguished. So tract 1 would be 105 acres, and the county proposes to purchase that 105 acres in fee. To do this, we'll need to amend the boundaries, as shown there, of tracts 1 and 2 to allow for the historic schoolhouse to be incorporated into tract 2, thus making tract 2 approximately 160 acres. The purchase price for the fee interest in tract 1, the 105 acres, would be $1.95 million, and the property would remain undeveloped in perpetuity. The purchase would also include 50% interest in the water rights associated with the entire property, and the purchase will enhance the wildlife habitat by removing that development right. The Open Space Board is unanimously recommending funding this purchase. There are no immediate maintenance needs. The irrigated area can be available for lease consistent with our other agricultural leasing, and future uses will be determined pursuant to our customary management planning process. Because the property currently has a conservation easement on it, the open space staff has been working with the Dart family in managing the property for their irrigation that's currently in hay, and also working with access and wildlife issues. Staff recommends that the board approve the ordinance on the first reading, which is set for the public hearing on July 9th.
Questions of staff at this time? Steve, and then
Matt, why was the schoolhouse taken out of tract 1? Was there a reason from the county's viewpoint or from the Dart family viewpoint?
The Dart family would like to keep that schoolhouse in their family. It's I don't know if you've been over there or inside of it. It's really well maintained. It's a great building. It's a historic structure, and they want to keep it with the rest of the property that they're retaining.
And I would be in favor of completing this transaction with them because the land would be taken out of private ownership. We would no longer collect property tax on it. So I would urge that we find a good person to lease it, and so the county could get some income off of leasing the agricultural land. And I would hope that, like a management plan, something like we're undertaking on the glacier property, for trying to come up with, perhaps an innovative way to use the land for an alternative crop, or use it, if it is for putting up hay. I've seen a lot of elk over there at times, and they probably knock back the hay crop quite a bit. So maybe some other crop might be appropriate, or maybe we want to manage it partly for elk grazing in the springtime.
Okay.
So those would be things to consider in a management plan.
Okay. I've talked to Gary Tenenbaum, and they're ready to go with, if need be, to lease it out to a tenant farmer to keep it in hay or whatever the management, whatever they decide. But I can definitely talk to Gary about different management plans for it.
Michael had a
Well, since it's already agricultural land, we don't really collect any property taxes on it to be significant in the first place. But John, let me ask you a question. That's the schoolhouse is a historic structure, and so that would give the owners the right to another building, a home site.
It would give the owners the right to come in and request augmentation of development approval from the BOCC, but the board would not be compelled to do so one way or the other.
So it's discretionary.
That's correct. The structure has already been inventoried and accepted on the, I forget the full name of the list for historic structures, but it is inventoried and has been designated. And so that being complete, preservation, or at least the removal or denigration of the structure is taken care of. If the board wanted to see something else, there hasn't been any present time, the development that was associated with the other parcel that will remain in private ownership are sufficiently acceptable.
Okay, so the structure as it exists now cannot be under threat of demolition or anything like that,
Correct.
or even abandonment.
Correct, although there is no affirmative requirement to invest sums of money into its upkeep.
Right. Okay. Thank you, John.
George?
In the past, there's been fisherman access, which you noted in that, and those who wanted to fish there had to go through a permit system through one of the local outfitting companies down valley. So what will happen to that system? Or
That system is with, I believe it's Taylor Fishing down in Basalt. That would be extinguished. And I know that Gary Tenenbaum has already been looking at different ways of creating fishing access for that. It would be open for fishing access. But what that exactly would look like, I know that's being worked on right now. But that would be open for public fishing.
yeah, thank you.
Rachel?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the map and presentation. Are there water rights associated with our purchase?
Yes, there are. There is a 50% share of one of the ditches called the Wheatley Ditch original construction, and that's 3.3 CFS, and then a 50% share of Wheatley Ditch second enlargement, and that's 2.7 CFS. So 50% of those.
Thank you. So,
Any
hearing?
additional questions? Accept the motion?
I would make a motion to approve the ordinance approving the acquisition of the Wheatley.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. And that was a first reading set for public hearing on July 9th. Next, we have another first reading set for public hearing on July 9th, and it is a airport management internship, which requires the acceptance of a aeronautics grant agreement.
Yeah, and Brian Griefey could not be here today. This is an item that was discussed in our budget process where an intern position was initially approved by the board pending application for an acceptance of the aeronautics grant to support the intern position. In essence, the airport receives a grant for half of the interns' costs and salaries. That's roughly just over $16,000. The internship program was successful, I think, from the airport staff's perspective last year, which was the first year, I believe, that we received the grant to do it. We requested that the board consider making appropriations pending acceptance of this grant and this year's budget. That was done. So this is the process now where we accept the aeronautics grant for that intern. I do not have specific information on the recruitment of the intern at this time, but Brian would certainly be able to answer those on the second reading.
Questions?
Would you second the motion?
Yep.
I move to approve the resolution accepting the airport intern state grant.
Second?
We have first from Rachel, a second from George. All those, any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next is an ordinance, Pickens County authorizing a 40-year ground lease for underlaying of the Hunter Longhouse condominiums project. John Ely is here to present, and I believe we have a recusal from.
Yes. I need to recuse myself from both this item and then the upcoming item for the Hunter Longhouse lease and the Common Grounds lease, as they are proximate to my residence. Thank you.
John, for convenience sake, would it be all right for us to jump from item 8 and then do 10 right after while Rachel's out of here? Does that make a difference? Okay, that way we'll grab you outside after those 2 items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Okay,
John?
Commissioners, with me this afternoon are Sherry Sansone and Tim Whitsitt. Both Sherry and Tim are on the Board of Directors? On the Board of Directors of API, Aspen Pitkin Employee Housing, Inc. API has been associated with the Hunter Longhouse project, I think, almost from the beginning, if not from the beginning. They have overseen the project, the management of the facilities, the construction of an additional 4 or 5 units, way back when at this point in time. The actual relationship between the county and API was somewhat suspended when the construction of the 5 additional units took place. APCHA stepped in and took advantage of their position to obtain more favorable financing for the improvements and upgrades and so forth than would have been available to API. The conclusion of the construction saw an arrangement between APCHA and then API with the original lease running from Pitkin County to APCHA. So at this point in time, that lease has another 14 years or so left to it. It expires in 2028, and we are recommending to the board that the board accept an ordinance in the form attached authorizing the execution of a lease between Pitkin County and API for a term of 40 years for the real estate which underlies the Hunter Longhouse affordable housing facility.
Questions, George?
Why did you pick 40 years?
I didn't.
We did, and it's really for the initial lease was a 40-year lease from the county that we started out with. We're now in the process, we've now paid off the bonds on the project, and we're at a kind of a potential fork in the road to say, well, what do we do next? And one of the things that is important to us is to secure our continued use and access, to that project, so we can decide: are we going to do a reconstruction or a rehabilitation? Are we going to do something else? It secures our future, essentially. We feel like we've been good stewards of the property. It's done well, and what we're trying to do now is establish a new period so that we can move forward with planning both for this property and potentially new projects that we might be able to get into.
But I guess my question is, it could have been 30 years, it could have been 50 years.
Yes.
Because sort of arbitrarily you felt that 40 years was a time period that you felt comfortable with in terms of trying to develop your future plans.
Yeah, the 30 years would really be the minimum term for a lease, and we found that if we were to refinance the property, which may be something that we'd like to do, the improvements, that a 30-year lease would be important to be able to make that happen.
Essentially, we wanted to rock the boat as little as possible. We took the original lease, which was a 40-year lease, and just said, let's do it again.
Oh, thank you.
Additional questions? I have a question. John, it's my recollection that when we did the easements that were needed for the Hunter Creek Trail alongside of this property, there was some talk and some discussion that, not that I have any intention or know of any intention to do this, but there was some talk of some additional potential on this piece of property for additional density of employee housing or something like that. Do we maintain those rights? Do those rights exist? Do you remember that conversation?
I remember the conversation vis-a-vis the trail, and allowance for the trail is specifically provided for in the version of the lease that is in the board's packet and that we're offering for acceptance at first reading. Anything further as far as the use of the property would have to, by necessity, go through a review process, not only in front of this board, because this board is the property owner, but also in front of the city council, because city council has the jurisdiction for land use approval on the property now. But there certainly is no intent, and in fact, the requirement of the lease is that the property be continued in a use position for affordable housing. If there is a potential for increased density, say, in the future, that would be a question that would be answered sometime.
Yeah.
If I may, that's something that is in fact being considered by this board. That would be initially, when we get a lease established and have the rights to the use of the property. That's one of the things that we're going to look at is does it make more sense for us to redevelop the property potentially with more density. Obviously, if that proposal was something that we favored, we would bring it to you as the landowners first, and as John said, would have to go through the full approval process at the city. But that's one of many alternatives that we'll now be able to consider once we have a lease term established.
Yeah, I just vaguely remember that being part of the conversation. We were looking at the trail easement and the space regarding the FAR that's allowable on that property pursuant to the city regulations as a potential. It was part of the discussion. So, but it sounds like we're moving forward with the same agreement that we had before, and that could potentially be part of the discussion if parties desire to go in that direction.
Right.
Additional questions? This is a first reading set for public hearing on July 9th. I will accept a motion on this if there's one out there. Steve?
We'll move to approve an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, authorizing a 40-year ground lease of lands underlying the Hunter Longhouse condominium project.
Second. First and a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are going to momentarily move from our consent action first readings to a confirmatory reading of a emergency ordinance that authorized a 50-year ground lease of lands underlying the common ground housing subdivision, and Johnny Lee is presenting that item as well. So we are skipping item number 9 and moving to item number 10 momentarily.
Commissioners, this item was adopted as an emergency ordinance last regular meeting, which was June 11th, 2014. The reason we took it as an emergency ordinance was that the lease term was inside of a 30-year period, and there was a potential transaction that was contemplated to close the Monday after our regular Wednesday meeting. The renewal or extension of the original lease term allowed for that closing to take place, and as far as I know, that closing did occur. So at this time, I would strongly recommend to the board that we go ahead and confirm this emergency ordinance and establish with permanency the lease that was accepted on first reading as an emergency ordinance back in June 11th.
Questions for Johnny Lee? Steve?
John, did the transaction take place on the June, whatever that date was? I can't remember now.
As far as I know, it did. It was the Monday after. I can't count out what that date is off the top of my head, but yes, as far as I know, it did, and they relied upon the execution of that emergency ordinance to do so.
My only comment is that there was a plea by one of the residents of Common Ground to outright extend this property to the HOA. It was an item that was discussed, I'm going to say 3 years ago, which my understanding was we came to a fairly final decision at that time. Of course, that decision could change given the board's preview there. That we would not extend this property or gift this property to the HOA, and it seemed a little unclear to the people of Common Ground that that decision had been made, and I just want to make sure that they're well aware of that. If they want to make another request to the board, I guess that's their right to make that request to the board. But they kind of sounded like they were saying, we hadn't really heard back from you in the last 2 years, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. So really don't need any discussion, unless anybody else wants to have any discussion on that, but I just want to make that clear. This is a public hearing as a confirmatory reading. Anybody in the public wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the board for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the confirmatory reading, emergency ordinance authorizing a 50-year ground lease and lands underlying the Common Ground housing subdivision.
Second. We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Great. Now we're going to move back to our consent action. First reading set for public hearing on July 9th. We have a ordinance repealing resolution 062-2012 and adopting medical license regulations into Pickens County Code. John Ely is presenting this too. We're going to get Rachel back in the room. So let's take another 5-minute break just to grab her. Today is June 25th, 2014. We're at our regular meeting, Board of County Commissioners, Pickens County, Colorado, and we are finishing up our consent action first reading set for public hearing on July 9th. We are going to discuss now a resolution adopting medical marijuana license regulations and repealing a previous ordinance regarding the same item. And John Ely is here to present.
Thanks, Rob. Commissioners, the original Pickens County medical marijuana regulations went into effect in 2012. They were done by a resolution, and at that time the county was not particularly engaged with the active review and licensing procedures as allowed under state law, but I guess it would be fairly characterized that the county deferred to the state to undergo a more in-depth analysis and investigation into an applicant's proposed licensed activities, and that the county merely confirmed whether or not the activities conformed with underlying zone district requirements. What this proposed ordinance does is first would repeal that resolution and then substitute in its place an established section of the Pickens County Code that would deal exclusively with medical marijuana licensing regulation procedures. Secondly, what the proposed ordinance does is to bring those licensing regulations and procedures in line as close as practical to the existing retail marijuana licensing and procedures regulations, so that there would be less, hopefully there'd be less confusion between applying the two different sets of regulations, and less confusion on the part of prospective licensees coming into the county licensing process. The two regulations will deviate from one another in a few notable regards, in that there is no age requirement for medical marijuana, obviously, only a doctor's prescription. The ability to obtain marijuana is not restricted to quantity, but is related to that same prescription. And pursuant to state law, the inventories and the sales transactions for medical marijuana as opposed to retail marijuana are kept discrete and distinct from one another for taxation purposes and also for regulatory purposes, to manage the inventory on what the state has mandated as a from seed to sale inspection, inventory, and regulation process. What these regulations do is bring the medical marijuana review processes in line with the retail marijuana processes by providing a public hearing and public notice of that hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners for determination of any license application. They relate the regulations to the recommendations and requests of the various county caucus areas, as those recommendations and requests have been relayed to the county, at least for a period of up to February of 2015, which is how the retail marijuana regulations were set up. The regulations also provide a great deal of discretion and flexibility for the BOCC in determining the appropriateness of awarding a license for a particular applicant in the county, by allowing the board to examine a great number of different factors and variables, including the appropriateness of the license activity within a given area on a particular property, and the parameters and prospective need of the community to be serviced by that prospective licensee. The item was discussed a couple of weeks ago at a work session in front of the board that was on June 10th. And the board requested a couple of changes. They appear as a red line to the proposed regulation. The first appears in section 6.49.050, having to do with licenses. There is an interlineation of an additional sentence which reads, any of these licenses may be issued, and these licenses referring to any type of medical marijuana license authorized by the county and the state. that these licenses may be issued and conditioned with specific requirements relating to the particular licensee. This is, of course, how the county has been doing business for retail marijuana licenses already, but this language makes it explicit and certainly advises the prospective licensee and the applicant that that may in fact happen. The next interlineation appears on the following page of the prospective regulation in section 6.49.070, paragraph 10, having to do with water supply, which will now read the information disclosed by the applicant and prospective licensee shall include the expected source and level of water use for the premises and a viable water supply for the anticipated level of consumption. This actually just establishes what was incorporated within the county review process for retail marijuana licenses already, but again, it makes it explicit and advises prospective applicants exactly what they must demonstrate, at least at a threshold level. The types of information requested by the BOCC may expand depending on the nature of the property or the location of the proposed license facility. The additional item in front of the board is a second ordinance which amends the retail marijuana regulations and for licensing and process, and they are the exact two changes that I just referenced for the marijuana or the medical marijuana licensing regulations, just to keep with the board's request that the two sets of regulations mirror each other as closely as possible. So with the adoption on first reading or the acceptance on first reading of both of these ordinances, it will keep the medical marijuana regulations and the retail marijuana regulations in line with each other and allow both regulations to go forward with hopefully the greatest degree of acceptance and understanding by the public. And that's it.
Have questions, Michael?
John, I hadn't noticed this before, but under 648-100, any change of the ownership interest of any of the individuals or entities associated with the retail marijuana establishment for which license is granted shall be reported to the Pickens County Retail Marijuana Licensing Authority within 7 days. Does that mean that someone could come and get a permit, we'd talk to an applicant, and then they could transfer it to someone else and there'd be no review?
It's a change of ownership because, and the reason that particular requirement is included in both the medical and retail regulations is that if a licensee is in fact a legal entity and not a natural person, for an LLC or a partnership or a corporation or something like that, the ownership interests in that entity may change. And if one partner drops out, another partner comes in, something along those lines, if that event does happen, then the requirement on the licensee entity is that we be notified of that change within 7 days.
So if a liquor license, if the interest in a liquor license is transferred, we issue a new liquor license, don't we?
Not necessarily, because liquor licenses can also be issued to legal entities as well.
I'm a little concerned about it because I don't know who I'd be issuing interest to and whether the state is going to look at that or whether we would look at it. And I would just hate to have a reputable applicant get a license and then before we know it, have transferred it to some other person that we have no relationship to whatsoever. So I'm a little concerned about that. That seems a little loose in a very tight sort of regimen here, and I'm not particularly comfortable with it.
The language is modeled off of the same type of requirement that exists at the state level. We can delete it. We can modify it to simply say that there won't be any change allowed without a reapplication of something along
Yeah,
those lines.
I mean, I'll ask the fellow commissioners, I would be much more comfortable with that. If we're concerned about this licensing procedure, it seems to me it's kind of a hollow procedure. If we have an applicant in front of us, they subsequently change the ownership after meeting with us. And I think John's suggestion is a good one, that they should reapply. I mean, I'll ask my fellow commissioners what they think.
Rachel?
Yeah, it raises some good questions, and so let me try to look at some of those. How many partners can be in a LLC?
It's not limited.
Unlimited. And so the one applicant who appears before us representing the LLC, we have no idea if there's another 10 or 25 partners?
We would know at the time of the application how many there are and who they are. And those individuals would be subject to the same background checks at the state level as the one member, perhaps, who is appearing in front of the BOCC. So at the time of the issuance of the license, we certainly know and understand everybody associated with that enterprise in an ownership capacity. But there is a degree of fluidity with the membership, with the participation or ownership of a legal corporation or a partnership or a joint venture or what have you, and that may change considerably, and you don't know at that point.
I guess you've answered my question, but my point is that we're not seeing all the applicants anyhow, you know, and I don't know if 1 out of 20 owners, a 5% share, would then require a full new hearing. There's a point at which it sounds a lot like interference with business, to be, you know, oh, I'm not sure, it's going to all be contingent, we can't really make this transaction until we hear from the board if there haven't been complaints against the license or other issues in which we can call the license forward. When we see liquor license renewals, do we see all the owners in the LLC before us and meet them and have a relationship with them?
No.
Do we call liquor licenses back up when a limited license partnership for alcohol changes one partner, one owner? No. And, you know, it also strikes me that the ownership is always very different from the management. The management and running of these facilities have to be vetted. They have to go through their background checks and everything like that. But the person coming in to talk to us really may very well be somewhat of an absentee owner, and the actual management and the ongoing operations, I don't mean out of state, I just meant not actively involved in the business, a silent partner. So I don't know what really would be accomplished by that, Michael. That's my thought.
Well, let me respond. You know, I think a businessman could look at this licensing procedure as interference with business. So what we're trying to do is protect the public interest here. And the public, as John pointed out, knows at the beginning of the procedure who all the applicants are. Not only the person who's sitting at that desk, but all the participants in the LLC. Subsequently, if there's a change of ownership, we just don't know who they are. So all I'm suggesting is that at all times we should know who these people are, because we're trying to regulate this industry and keep it safe for the public. And if it changes hands easily without our knowledge of who it is, I just don't think that's serves the public interest.
Steve?
In the section 649.110, changes in license, part A, it talks about transfer of ownership. And it says that the transfer of the ownership is not, or the license is not transferable or assignable. So if someone wanted to give it to a whole different entity, they couldn't do that anyhow in the regulation. And if the part in the previous page, if somebody wanted to drop out of the interest, somebody can change their percentage of their shares. They just have to let us know that kind of a change. Is that correct, John, the way I'm reading it?
Yes. In other words, if a license issued to XYZ Corporation or LLC, that corporation or LLC or joint partnership, whatever it might be, could not transfer that license to another entity, legal or not. And however, under the preceding section of the regulation, if an LLC, for example, changed its membership, somebody dropped out, another person invested in, that change in ownership interest doesn't change the entity who received the license. It just changes the ownership profile, and that is only required to be reported to us and not necessarily acted by or responded to on our part.
So we're protected already, Bob, from what you're worried about.
No, we're not. 99% of the LLC could change. As long as it retains the LLC name, fine. We wouldn't know who that other 99% were. And all I'm suggesting is that at all times we should know who the participants in this licensing procedure are. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting restricting business. I'm just suggesting that we should know who we're licensing to at all times.
I want to ask a question regarding this in terms of what the state requires in this portion. I hold a City of Aspen liquor license and a Colorado liquor license. Upon renewal of that license annually, we declare any changes of ownership or financial interest. We don't have a 7-day requirement to notify anybody, and we also, in addition to not just ownership, but we also have to notify any change in management, because there's a manager requirement associated with that liquor license as well. And subsequently, those people need to go through the proper background checks if that ownership changes. And this is probably what the state has modeled this after, which is the liquor license applications. So my question is, this is for our local authorities to require notification in 7 days of change of financial interest within the license entity or such. So my question is, what does the state require or do if notice is given? Because this really doesn't require any outcome to that notification. It just requires that notification. It doesn't allow any outcome in pursuant to that notification. Again, it just requires the notification. So my question is, does the state, if there is a change in financial interest and they are required to be notified within 7 days, does the state require an immediate verification of that individual's in terms of background check that they would, or do they wait for the application renewal like they do in a liquor license? Because I feel comfortable as long as some sort of requirement happens at the state level as triggered by a notification of financial change.
The state, as I said, this language in this subsection G was modeled on the state regulation. It's been so long since we drafted that. That was first in the retail marijuana regulation. I can't remember what the timeline is on the state. I'm thinking it's the same timeline. I don't think we picked a different date. What happens at the state level, though, is if there is a change of ownership by the addition of a new participant in an ownership position, then that new individual is subject to the same background checks as all the other parties. And as a consequence, if that individual does not pass those checks, so to speak, then the license may be revoked at the state level, which would render the local license essentially a nullity. So, for example, not only do they do a background criminal check, but they also have to confirm that the owner in the enterprise or the business, etc., is a Colorado resident. So, so there is an affirmative action that's precipitated at the state level. This provision was basically just to keep us informed so that we knew who we were doing business with. as Michael's brought up, if you have some degree of rapport, familiarity, or trust with the current face of an LLC, for example, that may very well color your opinion and therefore your decision on granting the license. If that ownership position changes, you might feel differently about the application or the license being issued. But in this regulation as written, it doesn't set up an action by the county, only that we are notified of the change.
Yeah, and then it sounds like the action would be taken by the state.
Right.
No, I just have to say I'm comfortable with 7 days. I don't think it's fair to characterize it as we'd never know or we wouldn't know. 7 days seems to be a reasonable time to me. And the issue, to my mind, is that, you know, until a certain point, when everything's been done with the attorneys and the title office or whatever you need, there hasn't been a transaction. So how can you say, well, you have to notify us first, but what if the closing doesn't go through, or what if the closing is delayed, or what if the partners withdraw and they don't make that transaction? I'm wondering how we would get pre-notified of a pending action that may or may not occur in a business transaction. They've obviously going to have to start vetting through the state, and they know they have the state requirements, and we would be notified. But I think it's more important that we not be fooled by the idea that the one person who appears in front of us, or their attorney, or their agent, when we do a license, represents the entirety of an LLC or a partnership, because they represent them, but they're not them. We don't see all the faces associated with any of these licenses necessarily. We could make that a requirement that everyone within an LLC applying for a license must appear before the board, but we haven't said that. And if we want to go that direction, then that it changes all the procedures in my mind, not just this simple provision.
I'm okay with moving forward with G as it's stated. I think certainly something to make sure that we ask the applicants, you know, upon renewal of their.
Jeanette had something back.
Michael, is if there's a report, if there's changes, it's called a corporate report of changes. Changes, LLC, corporate, and I bring them to you so that you can see. There is a form with liquor in it. And it's, you were right, I'm not always right. You do have to acknowledge that, but if you were to change your LLC or your corporate structure, you would also have to file that corporate report of changes. And it comes to the local authorities and to the state level. So I thought maybe that might help if you knew that process.
But that's what I'm kind of getting to. If there are changes within that structure, we should know about it, that's all. And we should have names. And I understand that when a representative is in front of us, we don't know all the other representatives, but they've been listed. And so they're listed in the first place. And all I'm suggesting is if that list change, we'd be notified of what those changes are. That's all.
And that's what the code requires here within 7 days.
No, it just requires that they report a change.
So you're proposing any change to the ownership interest of individuals or entities associated with a medical marijuana established for which the license is granted shall be reported. You're saying that maybe more specifically that should say shall be reported with a list of new.
Well, whatever John suggests.
With a list of new
just says
financial ownership.
Right. Any change of ownership shall be reported, which is pretty vague. All I'm suggesting is it should have a list of what that ownership change, who gave up their ownership, and assumed that ownership.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. I feel like that's what it's implying, but it's not specifically stating that. John, your thoughts on that?
Well,
I mean, this is saying we can just send a letter saying we've changed some ownership.
that's right. That's what
as opposed to we've changed some ownership and here is the new ownership.
the that can be certainly made more explicit. I guess what the discussion begs really is whether or not the board wants to be in a position of simply being informed or being in a position to accept the change. That's, I wasn't quite sure.
My position is the state is doing the acceptance or not the acceptance through their background check and those things. I think for us it's being informed of exactly what those changes are.
Yeah, I just want to know,
Yeah.
I want to be able to tell someone that that LLC now belongs to so-and-so.
Yeah.
That's all. And they can say, I know so-and-so, and go from there.
Rachel?
Yeah, I would agree with Michael's comment related to perhaps expanding on what shall be reported. I think that that's kind of the essence of, and maybe we have different interpretations, and then we could add language, and shall be administratively referred to the BOCC, because I think that's part of the process. It is going to be reported to the Pickens County Medical Marijuana Licensing Authority, and then we just establish the procedure that it's forwarded to us. So I can live with G with those changes. I do have a separate item if we're
Let's
off
just
that.
finish this one. George, do you have a comment on this item?
I agree. I think the key to this whole new industry is transparency. I think we need to be as transparent, and I think those applicants and those business owners need to be as transparent as possible.
John, do you have language proposal?
I would just
for-
insert that this notification shall disclose the name and identification information of any new owner and disclose the identity of any owner who no longer has a position with the licensing. That's acceptable.
Rachel?
And perhaps percentage of ownership. If it's, they're another one of 25% owner, whether they've just bought the majority, what percentage of ownership I think would also be important.
Okay, we'll put a percentage of ownership if applicable. A lot of times it's simply not a divided percentage. So.
Sure. And the other item I wanted to consider.
Would that be to section G, those changes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to bring up, and I believe this really belongs in both the medical and the retail, a new item, I think it'd be M, to say all marijuana-infused products must be clearly identified as such and packaged in a child-proof manner as required by state law. It may be redundant. It is required by state law. State laws change from session to session, but I think we should make it clear that those are the standards.
I'm good with that. John, are these acceptable changes in a second reading?
They're acceptable right now in the first reading, and they'll appear on the second reading in the public hearing.
Okay, this is first reading.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rachel, especially in light of today's news story about a child who put a piece of chocolate in a wrapper with no markings on it whatsoever, that they didn't know it had marijuana in it, and whether that was a retail or a medical marijuana thing, we don't know that, but any change we make, we would make to both of our
You have to keep them in concert.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I think making a list of what we're changing here, because we're going to have to come back and make amendments to our retail.
No, we're doing them both at the same time.
No, this is just the medical. This is enacting new medical and repealing the old medical.
And it's amending retail. That's why both of them are connected at the bottom half of
We
the
have two
agenda.
different ordinances.
We have a chance
Oh,
to
okay.
do them.
I would
Gotcha.
keep them both going at the same time.
Great, thank you.
To perpetuate a duality of action forever between the two sets of regulations.
George?
I have another question. It's on, page 9, it's term of license renewal. In the last sentence, John says, If a renewal application does not meet the requirements to be processed administratively, then the renewal application shall be heard by the BOCC at a public hearing. I thought we had talked about renewals being noticed as well.
Only if there was an outstanding complaint, if there had been any violation of the license or of state law or local regulations, or any other outstanding issues associated with the license facility and its operation. If everything has been occurring according to the requirements of the law and the license, and there have been no complaints that were unresolved, in other words, not just a I forget now exactly how the board described it, but a complaint that was more frivolous than substantial, in other words, something hadn't been resolved, then the renewal application would be taken in front of the BOCC. If the operation had been occurring consistent and had no problems associated with it, then the renewal would be administrative review.
Okay.
Additional comments at this time?
Do you accept the motion?
I will accept the motion.
Okay. I move to approve an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, repealing resolution number 062-2012 and adopting medical marijuana licensing regulations into the Pickens County Code, section 6.49, and an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, amending section 6.48.050 and section 6.48.070A10 of the Retail Marijuana Licensing Regulations section of the Pickens County Code as amended at the table today.
Second.
And that's our first reading set for public hearing on July 9th. Any discussion? I had one question for John in discussion. We also at this point have a moratorium against medical marijuana licenses. Does that moratorium automatically get repealed upon the approval of this on second?
It expires by its own terms, and in fact, it's expiring right now. I can't remember the exact date, but it is sunsetting by its own terms.
Okay.
And by having this in place with the first reading, this would be the controlling codes.
It would be controlling simply by virtue of the fact that there are no pending applications for new facilities. In other words, something that would have been caught by the established moratorium. And should we get one between now and the second reading, they wouldn't be issued that much time anyway, and so they would be processed under this regulation, provided this regulation is accepted and adopted by the board.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we are back to our consent public hearing second readings. We have a resolution. I'm sorry, yeah, we did. Sorry, because we skipped a few things here. So we skipped we didn't skip. We earlier did our confirmatory reading of the emergency ordinance of the common grounds, and now we are moving to item number 11, our consent public hearing second readings, where we have a resolution authorizing the Consumer Protection Program, and Kurt Dahl is here to present that item.
Good afternoon. So I'm here to get approval to renew the consumer protection contract with the State Health Department. Since the late 60s, we've had a contract to do consumer protection services with the State Health Department. Those services included inspections of restaurants, child cares, schools, and investigations of complaints of things like public swimming pools, campgrounds, and hotels and motels. The contract amount is for $10,000. This probably covers about 10 to 12% of our budget for this program. So the offset is not a lot. We do receive fees for the licenses for restaurants. That covers about 25% or so of the program as well. So there's about 40% of the program is covered by fees and this contract, and then the other 60 to 65% is covered by Pickens County. So there are a few changes to the contract this year. The amount does stay the same as last year, $10,000 was the same as last year. However, it was a decrease from 2 years ago. We received $12,000 and change. The requirement that has changed, there's a comment that says that the contractee will strive to achieve 100% of the inspections. Previous years that had been 80%. After discussing that with the state health department, really that's a change intended as a data gathering piece. The key here is that it's a strive. They're still really looking at working with us and getting at least an 80 or 90% minimum. But they're really looking for data to start to show where we're not getting 100% completion in all the rest of the state, so they can then also help try to support changes in fees and increasing fees for additional staff reps. Pretty much.
Questions for Kurt? Steve?
Kurt, is there, since you're being asked to do more for the same amount of money, basically, do you foresee that you'd have any trouble making all the inspections that the state is asking?
At this time, no. No, our number of inspections, fortunately, have stayed about the same. So we regularly meet, between 85, 90, 95% of the contract in any given year. So that's not really going to change how many inspections we do already. So I don't anticipate an increased workload along those lines.
Any additional questions? Rachel?
Well, I think it's a good opportunity to bring up to our manager and to our board as well that the annual Colorado Counties, Inc. request for legislative items is coming up very, very quickly. And this is an issue we've brought up before. It was felt to be not cooked or timely in terms of working with the Restaurant Association and other individuals who pay the fees for these inspections. Certainly there's a side of it that's the state's budget, that it shouldn't just all be fees. The state receives a portion of the sales tax from activities in restaurants and state sales tax and stuff. And this is about consumer protection and safety, public safety. It certainly is about our reputation as a state, as a foodie state. And the challenge is where communities that do not have the resources to backfill the budget end up with restaurants expected maybe once every 2 to 3 years. And a real problem when restaurants are closed down for one reason or another, where the state inspectors may not be able to get back out for months to be able to reopen those restaurants. And so in some of the real small communities on the plains, they've expressed that as a real problem with the lack of state inspectors. This is a clear example of what they say is how counties work, what counties do for the public, and that we are, as a branch and a subdivision of the state government, taking that responsibility and the extra debt burden on ourselves because the state really isn't doing it. But I wanted to, again, say if this is something that we want to make a legislative item going forward, to really push that organization, we need to submit it. If there are anything else from any of our other departments where they know they're looking for legislative changes or fixes this year, this is the time to really look for that. And while it's significant, perhaps proportional at some level to our budget, it really is a massive budget item for the larger counties who do all their own inspections, and they're losing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year out of their general fund. So I think the time has come, and the more we can be prepared to assist that effort going forward. We try to keep these things kind of budget neutral to the general fund, and I certainly wouldn't vote against this. I think it's a very important program, but we need to find a way to push that so it's not taking from our general fund in a way that we could advance other community interests. Thank you.
Additional comments?
Would you accept a motion?
Yes.
I would move to approve the resolution authorizing the Consumer Protection Program state contract.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Kurt. Next, we have a resolution adopting the 2014 Pickens County Wildfire Protection Plan. Daryl Grubbs is here to present that item.
Good afternoon. I'm Daryl Grove. I'm the Pickens County Wildfire Mitigation Specialist here for the second reading of the resolution to adopt our Community Wildfire Protection Plan 2014 update. Seems to be something going on. Just quickly to give you some background information on our progress with some of the management objectives of this CWPP. We have been very aggressive in reaching out to the homeowners associations in Pickens County. Put together a emailing list, hopefully to reach all of them. Disseminated information about grant opportunities. Thanks to the help of County GIS and Community Development, I've been given access to detailed mapping applications so that I'm in a position now to validate data regarding the specific homeowners associations and their potential risk. I have conducted, in fact, 6 site visits as of today, reaching from east of Aspen to East Owl Creek at the foot of Buttermilk West, all the way down to Swiss Village in the Crystal River Valley. We developed a template for a county preliminary wildfire assessment, which I put together, and I actually published the first one this week, which went to the Swiss Village Homeowners Association. I did recommend, by the way, for them that they develop a neighborhood wildfire protection plan in coordination with Carbondale Fire and myself and the State Forest Service. So the programs and the objectives mapped out in the Wildfire Protection Plan are up and running, and will continue to do so. With that note, this is the fundamental document that underpins the county's cooperation with our cooperators in Pickens County, the Division of Fire Protection and Control, the State Forest Service, the BLM, Pickens County, the fire protection districts are all brought together in a cooperative fashion with this document, which is now current in terms of the administrative information that it provides. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions and comments.
Questions? George?
So with the advent of the new Mountain Rescue building, we're going to have, as part of that building, an emergency operations center that could be utilized for emergencies such as wildfire. That would sort of be your command post?
That's actually managed by Valerie McDonald, the Pickens County Emergency Management Coordinator. Just as a note, ultimately I will probably play a role in the backup of that position, but it is not part of the responsibility of this mitigation effort for this wildfire protection plan.
And then in terms of the agency cooperation, BLM, Forest Service, neighboring fire districts. If there is a wildfire, does the plan speak towards any funding or sharing of funding, or how that works?
This particular plan does not address that. The annual operating plan and other plans in place have a built-in procedure for the transfer of authority and jurisdiction that ultimately allows the Sheriff's Office to apply to the state for additional funding support to support the suppression efforts. This is heavily directed to mitigation and prevention.
Rachel?
Yes. Thank you, Daryl, for this very thorough report and your new role with the county. While we're in front of the viewing audience, what are some of the most important steps that a homeowner can take to mitigate and perhaps prevent wildfire hazard on their property?
I think in terms of property owners,
yes,
if they have questions regarding their specific hazard, their risk, and what they might be able to do, they should contact the fire protection district. Each of the 4 fire protection districts has a mitigation program in place, and they will respond to specific addresses and homeowners and conduct an assessment and provide them with a list of recommended actions if needed.
Are those available to homeowners at no cost, or is it a fee to have an assessment?
To the best of my knowledge, they are all at no cost.
I think that as a community, we've all rejoiced at this wonderfully abundant wet snow winter. And the rivers are still looking pretty healthy. But I know that unless we get real quick monsoons, we're going to be very dry again. And I'm just hopeful that you can work with all the partners you already have and Pat Bingham to remind people that it's in their hands to really protect their own homes and their neighborhoods for the most part, to give us a hand to, it's kind of like the search and rescue model, that you have to participate in your own rescue and do the right things to begin with. So I really look forward to trying to really reaffirm that in people's minds, since we've had a wet year and you kind of forget about it. It's not like the drought of 2 years ago.
It'll be my experience with the wind events that we have had recently that contributes to accelerating the drying process. And later on in the fall, there is historically a second wildfire season in the Roaring Fork Valley, when the fine fuels that have sprouted everywhere to unprecedented heights eventually die and dry out. That fine fuel load becomes very combustible, and that'll be the second wildfire season here in the Roaring Fork Valley. People should be aware of that.
Thank you.
George?
So Daryl, a homeowner can contact the local fire district and get a free assessment in terms of what they may need to do to prevent and mitigate any wildfires. Is there also a funding source to actually do that mitigation for the homeowners?
There is a county wildfire code that applies to new developments and applications for redevelopment, whatever that might translate into. The properties, there are a few hundred properties in Pitkin County which have these mitigation obligations laid onto them. But currently there is no enforcement protocol, no way for an individual to go out and ensure that those mitigation landscaping requirements have been adhered to over time. There is a focus group currently working at the state level with the governor's office, driven by the real estate agencies. They're looking at transfer of ownership obligations of mitigation requirements, so that if the property is sold and it is encumbered in its initial development with mitigation requirements, they're obligated to disclose that to the purchaser or the new owner of that property, and hopefully there'll be some sort of an enforcement aspect tied to that, but currently not.
I guess I wasn't clear, but my question is, I thought a couple of years ago Pitkin County offered a subsidy to help owners do some fire prevention mitigation on their properties. No?
I think there might have been a one-year tax credit, state tax credit or something.
So maybe I can provide some clarity. We did fund the fire mitigation position. At that time, we did not provide any funding for actual mitigation work, but we did work with, for example, homeowners associations and such to do the planning and identify the mitigation needs, and we did not charge for that. As far as additional resources, there was the possibility of a tax credit program that we had discussed a couple years back. I believe adoption of this plan is key to qualifying for those tax credits if they still exist at the state. And I can't recall, they had a cutoff date. I can't remember if it was 2014 or 15. But that was really the only direct financial tool for mitigation. Other than we did also do some work either through like in the smuggler area and also with utilities and such up in the Red Mountain area where we did some mitigation work in our easements and in utility easements, but not for individual homeowners.
Okay.
Steve?
When I was at CCI and Keystone for the summer meeting, I went to the Summit County landfill for a tour of their facility there, and they've crafted a very successful composting project there, largely based on using material from their wildfire mitigation program, which they have a very extensive mitigation program there because of all the beetle-killed pine trees that they have in Summit County. And I thought it was a pretty innovative way to tie the two things together. So they found a way to use the material that the people were removing from their property. And I know that they have some equipment available that when the county is going around doing their wildfire mitigation, individual landowners can bring material from their property to have it shipped and removed at no additional expense to them besides just their labor getting the material to the road where it could be chipped. And that might be something we might want to consider here, if having portable chipping equipment that we could take around different subdivisions or individual homeowners' properties if they're doing the wildfire mitigation. And that could just be a way to encourage landowners and subdivisions to really do the work and not have to incur quite as much of a cost to it. So that would be something for you to consider as we go along.
Absolutely. We used actually that incentive with the City of Aspen program in 2012, and it was very successful. One of the most frequent questions that I'm getting now from homeowners associations relates to how do we dispose of the debris once we have done the mitigation work. And currently, they have to deal with that material themselves, whether it's bundling it up and taking it to the Pickens County landfill, where sometimes they are charged and sometimes they are not. There really isn't a policy, to the best of my knowledge, about that aspect of it. They have to rent and or contract to have the material disposed of.
I might add on to that. Yeah. There actually is a practice, and we had talked to the board, and I should have included this in answering George's question, that the landfill has been accepting chipped material for free. We have not funded a program We have not funded a program, as Steve has suggested, that would actually provide the resources to go out and pick up materials, chip them, and then compost them. And we have not accepted unchipped materials at the landfill for no cost. And so those are opportunities that we could look at. There will be a cost associated, obviously, depending on how far we go, particularly if we're providing the labor to pick up and chip. That'd probably be in addition to our current operations.
Rachel?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's something we should take a look at. Clearly, we're not talking about the balance of the issue, which is we have some very well-off neighborhoods and homeowners associations and may well be able to take care of the expense themselves. We may have others that are less so. And we have some areas that are priority areas and very both at risk and perhaps more overgrown. And we have some areas that are less so. And so there'd be a lot of different factors to consider. But to my mind, if we could find some reasonable ways that further encourage the appropriate behavior and make it easier, a more straightforward path for people to actually do that, it would be general fund expense to the extent there's a program, but it also, in the long run, could really save us a lot of money and a lot of problems. So I thank you for bringing that up, Steve, and I'd love to discuss it further in a future work session.
Michael?
Daryl, thanks. I'm looking at the map 3.1.4, Pickens County wildfire risk plus hazard value mapping. Could you outline what these maps mean? So you have wildfire risk plus hazard plus value. What does that mean?
The original mapping was done in 2002. It was done at the state level of project, so the resolution at the county level suffers a little bit as a consequence of that. What they did was construct a rational matrix that could be applied to the individual pixels on that map, which would result in the visual representation that you see of wildfire risk. And it would include the slope of that particular property, north facing, steep or flat, the aspect, north facing, south facing. The south facing slopes dry out much quicker. They were able to perform a analysis of the color of that pixel, and from that color they could deduce what the fuel source was, whether it was evergreen, aspen, fields, grasses, sagebrush, pinyon juniper, whatever. And they then put that information through this numerical matrix, and that resulted in a risk color for that particular pixel. And they assembled all of that data, and that resulted in the hazard maps that you see with you now. That process is being updated. There is a new program called CORAP, Colorado Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, which I have access to, and they are refining that analysis and reducing the resolution so that it's more specific to a given neighborhood.
So, but what I'm asking is, so you sort of outlined some degree of risk. What's the difference between risk? What's the difference between hazard? And what's the difference, what's value? So you have, essentially, you're adding these three elements, and I'm not sure what they mean. You outlined some stuff, but risk could be, what is risk, what is hazard, and what is value?
The hazard focuses on the potential for fire activity. The risk is associated with the likelihood of that fire activity occurring. And the value was added in an effort to assign priority to a given parcel in terms of values at risk.
So, because it looks to me like, well, most of Pickens County could be in red, but really what the mapping shows is that the red areas are around residences or people where people live, essentially.
Lives and property.
So that seems to me to be the addition of value, because you have property and life at stake, and then you have risk and hazard combined in those areas. And that's why this mapping shows these red streaks, red islands throughout, not throughout Prince County, but essentially where people are in residence.
It's an effort via this matrix to help us identify priority areas for these efforts.
Okay, I was just trying to understand what the mapping means.
Additional comments? Motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, approving adoption of a Pitkin County Community Wildfire Protection Plan 2014 update.
Second.
First and second, any discussion?
Did you open a public hearing on this?
I have not. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the board. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Now we are into our open, we need to continue a land use action. The Gardner's taking determination is going to be continued to July 9, 2014 by request of the applicant. Do we have a motion to?
So moved.
Second. We have a first and a second. Is this a public hearing, John?
No.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Open discussion. John Peacock, do we have anything for open discussion from you? Open discussion for anything from commissioners?
John, on the web agenda, it doesn't have Darrell's presentation, yet in the packet it did have his AIS, so that was omitted. The web agenda that was posted, at least the one I got, didn't have Darrell's presentation listed as an item.
Listed as an item.
However, in the packet, it did have Darrell's AIS, his packet. So all I'm suggesting is that there was an omission in the agenda.
Okay, I was actually looking on the agenda from the web this morning and today. So, are you not seeing it? Item 12. So where did you just get this?
It's on, what Michael is saying, it's on this agenda, but it's not on our email agenda that comes through on the back.
Okay, I'll have to look into that because it is on the web agenda.
Yeah, well, it's at least the online agenda that I got. So it just needs to be consistent, because I would hate people, we need to have accurate information for these public hearings.
It's right on the web.
Anybody else have open discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm the date. July 11th is the final day for the Colorado County Inc.'s legislative issues to come forward. So we should set up some work session time before then that John can bring us any that have been developed by staff, and then certainly any that board members have, try to develop them or work with John, because it's a kind of complicated form. You have to give potential opponents, potential supporters, why CCI should get involved, things like that. And you like to have it a nice explanation, because when all the commissioners meet, that's what they receive, is the form we send in. And so it has to be in pretty good shape. And I really would just harken back to George bringing forward Independence Pass last year, which was a really valuable maneuver for us, and a real issue and a real problem. We were able to get relief, and I think we've seen some administrative relief from bringing forward some of the veterans issues in the past and things like that. So it is a good opportunity and a good use of our membership.
Thank you. Any additional open discussion by the board? Steve?
Kind of an announcement. I don't know how many of you know that Gail Schwartz has moved to Crested Butte they sold their house in Snowmass Village, and she's still living in her Senate district in Gunnison County. They're living in the old town of Crested Butte. They bought a house there. So I'm going to miss having Gail living in our county, but she said that she still will be over here a lot, and we'll still see a lot of her, even after she's no longer our state senator. But I'm kind of happy for them, but sad for us that we don't have them in our community anymore.
Very good.
Rachel?
Well, I was just going to say we have a special meeting set up to go into executive session, and I'm wondering if you'd like to do the motions for that before we end this meeting, and then we could have that on Grassroots.
Sure. I will take a motion to go into executive session. We are going to be meeting over at the courthouse main floor, Old Commissioners Meeting Room. It's for the purpose of property acquisitions pursuant to CRS 24-64024B.
Actually,
4A.
So moved.
Second?
Yeah, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And unless there's any other raising of hands for open discussion, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Well, no.
Oh, yeah, we're moving our location to continue our special meeting
It's
somewhere
a recess
else.
until our
A
executive
recess.
session.
Sounds good.